Welcome to the Young Canucks. For our first story, we're going to be covering the Toronto real estate market and a bit of the Canadian one overall. Now, there have been a lot of reports that we might see an adjustment over the next few years. Some media outlets have been calling for a 10 to 20% adjustment. Recently, a Globe and Mail article had a source suggest that new condo prices are down 15%. Now, there's lots of reason to believe that there might be a real estate adjustment. For example, if we pull up graphic 1 here, economic analysts, we can see that prices of homes have gone up significantly as compared to incomes. So there's reason to believe that there might be an adjustment as a result of this. And the media has been really focusing in on these parts. However, there's also other things that the media hasn't been covering. Now, I will admit that we're a little bit biased in this respect. We're recent home buyers in Toronto, so we certainly don't want to see a bubble or even an adjustment. However, there have been some things that haven't been covered. For example, rental prices are very high right now. They're high enough that they cover most mortgages for one bedrooms. So for most people, they would rather rent it out than sell it. Another issue is interest rates are really low. And you could argue that, well, this causes a problem when interest rates goes up. But there's also the fact that governments have recently imposed very strict lending rules. So the people who are getting mortgages can usually carry them even if interest rates do go up.
Yeah, and that's a good point that you raised because when we look at the American scenario and what happened back in 2008 with the market crash, I mean, I think a lot of people recognize that a big factor in that bubble was the fact that these banks and lenders were giving out mortgages to people that perhaps had no business in getting the amounts that they were getting. And the banks were really not being careful in qualifying these people properly, which when things got really tight, it really became evident that they couldn't afford the mortgages that they were given originally, which isn't, I'm glad to hear is not the case. In our market, it seems like the banks are doing a better job of qualifying people.
And if there is interest rate increase, I suspect it's going to be gradual, and I suspect it's not coming anytime soon. And given the fact of the strict lending rules, when that interest rate comes up gradually, people are probably going to be able to afford the increase.
Well, I mean, back to the idea of the prices going down, I think it's unrealistic of people to expect that these developers could really go any lower than really the economic feasibility will allow them to be. So if it's no longer possible for the builder to make a certain profit that he's expecting from the big risk that he took putting the condo on the market, I don't really think that the price will drop. Well, he can no longer afford to build the building. And there's a few things that happened over the years that I think has made condo building more expensive. For example, the HST kicking in. I think a lot of people still remember how much that has increased materials, labor over the last few years. And more recently, there was an increase in Toronto municipal development fees too, which when added to the equation, the builders have to swallow. So I don't think that they can drop prices any further than because of these things. And gas prices, energy prices, costs of glass, steel, and concrete, all these things add up to a point where the builder has to charge a certain price to get the money back out of the developer too. So I'd like to play that, the devil's advocate and say that yes, developers do make a profit and they want to make a profit, but all these things combined that I just mentioned make it impossible for them to do it when they drop prices below a certain point.
And that's a really great point, and I don't think I've seen any of the major media outlets in Toronto cover it as far as talking about the cost of development going up. The reality is everything's getting more expensive, including building buildings. So why do you think that media is really focusing in on all of the negative aspects of housing prices right now, as opposed to these things that we've been talking about?
I think there's a lot of factors, but I think the biggest one for me, when I hear these stories pop up, that they do it, once in a while. They don't say anything about the condo housing market for a while, and they pop out with these stories randomly getting everyone's attention. I think a lot of it has to do with selling newspapers and getting people to tune in because people love to hear these negative scare stories that get their attention. And let's face it, newspaper giants and radio giants, they want to make the money. I think it gets people to tune in and get the ratings up too.
And just to be clear, we're not saying that the market is going up for sure or stabilizing. It may very well go down. We're just making the point that it's not necessarily going down based on the market indicators that are out there.